Welcome to The Honest Media. I'm Tom Pappert, your host. Today is Thursday, November 9th, 2017. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Craig Chrisler. But this week, we do have a special guest here in the studio. Is Adam Kokesh, a candidate not for president in 2020, running as a libertarian. Later in the episode, we're going to talk about what Trump's doing in Asia, Donna Brazile's shocking revelations in her new book, and we'll discuss the state of the culture war throughout the United States of America and the world. But first, as I said earlier, we do have Adam Kokesh here in studio. He started to build a name for himself many, many years ago as an Iraq veteran against the war, later went on to become a political candidate, went to talk radio, eventually made it to a TV show on Russia Today. Then he went independent and in recent years has written a book called Freedom, which you can find at thefreedomline.com. You can also find him at kokeshfornotpresident.com. Well, Adam, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks. I got to say, this is a real honor after almost exactly a year to the date coming through on the For the Love of Freedom tour last year. Now it's the Taxation Theft tour this year, and I'm just honored. You know, hey, must have been a good experience for you guys. So thanks for having me back on it, and it's you know, always great to get out of the bubbles and go and come to places like Wichita that don't seem to have a lot of big stops, but we get to see the entire country this way, and it's awesome. It's a blast.
Well, and I appreciate you coming, because like you say, a lot of people overlook Wichita. You know, it's like what we had to do to get Jeffrey Tucker in this city, you wouldn't believe. But so I want to say, you know, you've increased the size of your operation. I mean, when I met you the first time, it was you and one guy, and now you've got a whole team, right?
And I have to say, in places like Wichita, and not that Wichita is particularly special, but in places like this, the libertarians are generally that much more enthusiastic. Sometimes like in Oklahoma where we were last night, it is an intensely statist conservative area where
sure.
There are T-shirts that can get you charged with a felony. You know, I mean, it is that kind of government insanity. And we had that here in Wichita, of course, last year as well, and the year before, and it's always a great place to come back to.
Well, and again, we do appreciate you coming. You know, we're the flyover country, but we have some fun people here. So now I want to get into that a little bit, because a lot of our viewers, Craig, I think you'll agree with me, they're a little bit more mainstream conservatives. We try to push them to the perimeters. That's what we're all about, is giving people the honest perspective, not trying to get people to thinking, you know, we don't want to tell people how to think. So tell us exactly, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you would consider yourself an anarcho-capitalist or a free market anarchist. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yeah, I prefer the term voluntarist because it's much more precise. A lot of those terms come with baggage and other meanings that come into them. But yeah, I mean, if you want to, but most of those labels are somewhere in the right neighborhood. But voluntarist specifically means that I believe in the ideal that all human relations should be voluntary. And this is capitalist in its nature, in that capitalism is based on free exchange and ownership of the means of production. And I just redefine that the ultimate means of production is not a factory or a machine. It's the individual human being, the human mind. You own yourself, and that really is the foundation of my philosophy. But that's not what's important here. And when we talk about meeting average Americans on this tour, and I say, I'm getting ready to run for president in 2020 on the platform of dissolving the entire federal government, most of them go, sounds like a good start. You know, they say that America is ready for this. We are ready for another revolution, and this time it can be peaceful, it can be deliberate. But yeah, this is what we're suggesting, the final American revolution, that we live up to the promise of our founders and dissolve the federal government in a peaceful, orderly, responsible manner. And most Americans at this point have realized we're too good for this government. Like, there's no way around it. This is ridiculous, you know. And in terms of how things have shifted, you know, there's already been a paradigm shift. You see in the headlines right now, Catalonia, Kurdistan, there was Brexit, the Scottish vote, tons of places around the world where they're demanding independence. They just, we don't want to be a part of this bigger collective. We want autonomy. We want self-determination in the United States. I don't know, does Kansas have a good independence movement here?
We try. We had a libertarian candidate for governor a few years ago.
On the secession platform.
Who actually did way better than anybody thought he would do. So you got to give credit where credit's due.
Exactly. And so New Hampshire, Vermont, the Republic of Texas, and Colorado, the 51st State Project, Jefferson State, Northern California, Southern Oregon, Alaska, Hawaii, even California now, right? Wants to split off from the Union. I'm sure you wouldn't miss them. But California is America's favorite punching bag. But the thing is, you mentioned conservatives and rural conservatives in an area like this. If they're honest, if they're able to separate their emotional attachment to the state from their legitimate attachment to the country and to the ideals. Americanism is not worshiping a flag. It's not submitting to government. It's not forcing everybody into a one-size-fits-all solution. It's about freedom. It's about the unalienable rights of the individual. And we have an opportunity here to once again lead the world forward in freedom as we did with the first American Revolution. And that is an incredible opportunity that I think this is our generation's time. This is our opportunity. This is our moment.
Now, earlier, I guess before the show started, we talked about something that is a frequent criticism of libertarians, of voluntarists, of free market capitalists, whatever you want to call it, and that is foreign policy, because a lot of people say, well, Mr. Libertarian, I get that you don't like the government.
And what are you going to do about Aleppo?
Exactly. What about Aleppo? What are we going to do about those poor Aleppians? But no, I think that that's something that comes up is, what do you do if some foreign entity wants to come invade and you don't have a way to prevent that? So tell us why that's not even the right line of questioning.
Well, first of all, the idea of a foreign policy in a libertarian society is kind of contradictory, because when you use the word foreign policy, you're saying that people inside of these lines on a map are part of one special government protected group, and people on the other side of those lines are in a different group, as opposed to these are individuals who are able to relate to each other directly in commerce. Just because you live on the other side of a line for me doesn't mean I shouldn't be able to trade with you directly as an individual or through companies or corporate representatives, whatever, but I shouldn't be relating to you through a government that doesn't represent me in the first place. So the idea of foreign policy in a free market doesn't really exist. We don't relate to people as governments. We don't relate to people as countries. We relate to people as people with rights. They're legitimate collectives in company or corporate structures, right? So there's a bigger issue here, though, at the heart of this that is really important in understanding America, because the founders of this country were against the very concept of a standing army entirely. This means they were against having a military, a government military. They knew that the militia was the only legitimate defense of a free people, and that the military represented the government's monopoly version of that. Militias defend freedom, militaries defend government's ability to govern and rule and tax and exploit people. So having a military actually makes us less safe. And this is a tough thing for a lot of Americans to wrap their heads around, because we've been so propagandized. It's been shoved down our throat from a very young age. It's the biggest part of the government racket. It's the most destructive. It's the most lucrative for the profiteers. And that's why we've been lied about with what war itself is from a very young age. When we are told that wars are fought between countries, it's nonsense. Wars are conducted by governments using violence to expand their protection rackets. And when you submit to your government, that's what makes you a juicy target for another government to come in and govern you.
Well, Adam, hold that thought. We've got to take a moment off, but when we come back, I want to ask one more foreign policy question. Let's see if it's as good of an answer as that one. You're watching The Honest Media. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Honest Media. I'm Tom Pappert, again with my co-host Craig Chrisler and Adam Kokesh, running not for president yet. What is the correct way to say that?
Right now we're saying that I'm running for not president because we're not filing FEC paperwork yet. We're in a pre-exploratory phase at this point. We'll be filing in January, and that's when we get to say for president. But it's also more accurate to say that I'm running for not president, because I'm running against the presidency, and the platform is to sign one executive order that includes my resignation and initiates the process of dissolving the federal government in a way that's laid out in advance. The American people will know exactly what they're voting for. And it's not for me to be president. It's what we are doing with this campaign, which is turning the presidential election into a national referendum on whether or not the federal government should be allowed to exist at all.
Now, in the last segment, I wanted to let you finish. I interrupted your thought process on foreign policy for our commercial break, because we're traditional television, and isn't that so much fun? So I'd like to let you finish.
Well, I appreciate that. And it's not just finishing the thought, but this is a really important point because it comes from my experience personally in Fallujah in 2004 with the Marines. We were literally making enemies faster than we could kill them. Like, let that sink in for a minute. The global war on terror was engineered that way, and that's just one of the consequences, one of the symptoms of having a military that leads to the military-industrial complex and all of those types of abuses. But more fundamentally than that, when you submit to a government and say, please govern me, tax my income, subject me to your monopoly defense services, that's what makes you a juicy target for another government to come in and govern you. And if a new government in America had to start from scratch, it would probably take them, I don't know what, a couple hundred years before they could get to the point our government is at today, where they've got the average American working for it about half the year when you add up all the hidden fines and fees and taxes and costs of government. I mean, you really, if you care about freedom, you should be so lucky in America to have your government overthrown and taken over by a foreign government that would get to start from scratch, or have to start from scratch rather than get the existing tax base that they have here. But this is an important idea that's not just fundamental to freedom, it's fundamental to Americanism. Because the founders of this country, and in founding this country, they not only proved, they asserted that a military was not a legitimate way to defend a country, that the only legitimate defense is a well-armed population that refuses to be governed by anyone. And I think even conservatives here in Kansas will understand that the Admiral Yamamoto quote from World War II, the reason they didn't invade the mainland?
The gun behind every blade of grass.
Exactly. So they know that that's a more legitimate and effective defense than sending people to stand in lines. I mean, how did we win the American Revolutionary War? We invented guerrilla warfare, right? We didn't quite invent it. I don't want to take too much credit here on behalf of the founders, but we went from standing in a line, shooting at each other, to that guerrilla style warfare, because it's more effective, it's more efficient, and ultimately it's a more effective defense.
Well, so now let me ask, because this is something that I think a lot of people who may be willing to take the last step into real libertarianism, I think they run into a kind of almost a guilty collective conscience, because they say, well, okay, so I agree, but for the past 80 some odd years, the United States has been going places and doing things.
You can go back to the Barbary Pirates if you want, even Jefferson's.
You can go back really far. You can, and you can say, the United
that's not on the same scale, obviously.
But it is almost, because the United States has been meddling places and doing things and trying to make it better, or lying and saying they're going to make it better. And a lot of people say, well, look at what happened in Iraq and in Syria with ISIS. The United States was there. Nobody liked being there. Almost from the first moment we were there, everybody thought it was a bad idea.
Well, that's not true. Halliburton was having a great time.
That's very true. So were we here. I got to defend Wichita has a lot of aircraft plants. We were doing all right back then. We were. But, nobody knew if we were winning at any given time. I don't. Maybe you guys on the ground didn't even know if we were winning.
No, it was an occupation.
Right.
It was not a war.
Right.
It was an invasion and an occupation. You could say there was the invasion was a war, sure.
Right.
But after that, no, it was not a war.
But so then the United States, it leaves more or less. And then somehow, as though this is a pattern, even worse people show up. And they start trying to kill just anybody for any little thing. You think women shouldn't have to wear headdresses. Oh, I'm going to kill you for that. Any little thing. So how do we keep the ISISes of the world from forming if there's no united, it's like this catch-22 a lot of people think we're in. If we don't have the empire, then there will be terrorists. And if we didn't have the empire, well, then there wouldn't be terrorists. So how do we get out of this?
Well, you've seen the trucks they're driving around Iraq and the Middle East now in the name of ISIS, right? They're all
the plumber down in Texas, right?
Yeah, they're all made in America. F-250s and Humvees, and it's even more fundamentally than that. It's that the foreign policy of the U.S. government has destroyed countless lives. And you're not going to solve the problem with the institution that created it. Now, in the United States, we would be twice as wealthy every individual's income would double if it wasn't for government. This is not, I'm not just making this up, this isn't some hypothetical. When you add up all the costs of government that an individual bears, the average working American is working for government half the year. Imagine if we all had twice as much prosperity to work with, twice as much ability to contribute, to help the world, to heal the world, to make good on that. And if you really feel guilty, if that's what's motivating it, and I don't think that's it. I think it's more the security, like, oh crap, we pissed them off,
well, it could be
and we
fair.
don't want, and they're really angry now, and we just want to just don't hurt us now, because there's
Right.
that legitimate fear. And I made a video that was actually banned on YouTube a few years ago called "The Restraint of Muslims." And just to put it in perspective, if you look at all of the deaths due to terrorism throughout all of the last 100 years, and you look at versus the deaths caused of innocent civilians by U.S. government's foreign policy, they're not even on the same scale. If people, like, it is a testament to the restraint of Muslims that their retaliation, if you want to call it that, has been, and that's collectivizing, of course, but that it has been so minuscule. And we should be embarrassed, frankly, as a proud free people, to say we are afraid of this mouse, and we ignore the lion that is government, and we turn a blind eye to that greater evil that it represents, because they're not even on the same scale, not even comparable. And if we want to really make good on the debts that we, in a sense, you can say, owe to the world as the American people, the most important thing we can do is stop causing the pain, destroy the institution that is capable of that, and create the safeguards to ensure it never happens again. After that, I think what the American people will produce, we are the most generous country on earth. The people in the Middle East, the people in the rest of the world who resent America are smart enough to separate the government from the people. They know that the United States federal government is a common enemy of the American people, as it is of the people in Iraq, and the people in Afghanistan, and the people in Syria, the people in North Korea, the people in all parts of the world who suffer at the hands of the American military empire.
Well, that was definitely a good answer. I think that's equally as good as the last one he gave us. So bravo. We've got to take another.
Oh, now I got to get it down to 30 seconds, though.
Well, we've got one more segment with Adam coming up. So we're going to take a moment off. You're watching The Honest Media. We'll be right back with our final few minutes with Adam Kokesh. Welcome back to The Honest Media. We've had voluntarist Adam Kokesh, and I think I'm saying that voluntaryist is how I should be saying
Well,
it.
there's two different ways. Some people say voluntarist, some people
Right.
say voluntaryist. I think etymologically, if that's the right word even, voluntarist is
Okay.
more technically correct, but I actually say voluntaryist because for people who haven't heard the word before,
Right.
it says voluntary.
They may be
It's very
thinking
clear.
somebody who does a lot of charity if you
Yeah.
say voluntarist.
Which we do as well. We
Right,
support
right.
volunteerism as well as voluntarism.
And so in this segment, we're going to kind of talk about that. So you're doing a lot of work right now. You're going across the country. You've got a platform all figured out on your website. I think we can pull that up and get that on screen right now. And so I'll turn it over to Craig, because we want to ask some questions that I think will give you a chance to talk about what a no government running platform looks like. So Craig, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I did have a question. Like all the welfare recipients that are receiving federal dollars, what would happen to them?
Yeah, well, it's not a no government platform. It's a localization of government platform, if I may first. And it's a very important distinction because this is the everybody gets what they want strategy. You live in a conservative state or a liberal state, you don't want to be tied to those crazy people over there, right? You want your state to be reflective of your values. You want your government, if you have to have one, to be reflective of your values. So you're more likely to get what you want when we're not forcing this giant one-size-fits-all solution. But to your question, that definitely presents one of the challenges of this. How do we ease our way out of the system? So a lot of systems can be transitioned to the states. So they're going to be cut up into 50 pieces, and there's a very easy administrative transition for that. In the bigger sense, though, we have this forced retirement thing called Social Security that every American pays into, which incidentally provides us the greatest mechanism for paying back the American people. Now, I don't think there's anything more anti-freedom or unlibertarian you can say than, I want to be president of the United States. I want to be in charge of this giant violent monopoly, this evil institution. I want to impose my good libertarian ideas on the entire country, as opposed to what I'm suggesting. I'm going to throw the ring in the fire. We're going to leave 50 independent states that are much more capable of governing themselves better than with the federal government restricting their ability to do so. So as we liquidate the federal government's assets, the things that don't get transitioned to the states, like the IRS, Department of Education, Department of Commerce, all these regulatory agencies that don't really do anything. Now, the ones that do stuff, there are different things for different plans for different agencies we can get into. But overall, the answer is that we're going to liquidate the majority of the assets of the federal government, or at least the assets that don't get transitioned to the states. I got to be careful, because you say most of the assets, you might think all the land mass and everything. No. The states will still get that. It's not all. So Social Security is how we repay the creditors in this case, because we're disowning the debt that is to the foreign banks and foreign governments and foreign corporations. No, that all goes away. We are declaring bankruptcy. And the real creditors of the federal government are the American people who have been stolen from our entire lives. So when we are done liquidating the federal government, all that money goes into Social Security, spun off as an independent institution that now continues to distribute that money until it runs out. Which might mean that, to make it feasible, we have to lower the retirement age to 18. We've been stolen from for a long time, so who knows? This could be the way that we take advantage of the fact, if I may step back for a second, a lot of libertarians and conservatives look at the welfare state as a purely evil thing, and I agree that fundamentally it's unethical the way it's being done. But if you step back and go, wow, we've come a long way as a species. We can support so many idle people. That's a great thing. That means the rest of us we should all have to work a lot less to enjoy the same quality of life. And right now, it's government that is holding us back from that in a lot of ways.
Well, and you talk about, I think this is going to get kind of to your question, Craig. You talk about the idle people, and I think that's one of the great tragedies of our time, that the government has tricked so many people into not using their power as people, their production as people, whether it's art, whether it's science, whatever it may be. Instead, the government has tricked these people into taking a check and sitting at home. So how do we get these people that's the mindset they're in, to realize that life could be so much more if they could get off the teat?
Well, it's more about, for me, I think, earning your own retirement. And I think that when we really unleash America's economic potential, the economic potential of the world, the restriction of freedom of movement by government is one of the greatest barriers to economic productivity. And again, not my analysis, but from studies that I've read, if we were to eliminate border controls in the whole world, global productivity would double. Just that, just allowing people to travel to work where they want to work, global productivity would double. That means everybody gets twice as much stuff. Or we enjoy the exact same quality of life and everybody has to work half as much. And what that does is it's not, you suggest this as this ideal, this, traditional, well, you're going to have a job and a sense of purpose in life, and you're going to be part of a team, and you're going to have a regular salary, and your community's going to take care of you. We're kind of past that. Even you guys, right? You consider yourselves more entrepreneurially minded rather than, wage slave minded. I think that's the opportunity that everybody gets. So like for the people on welfare, it's not, hey, you need to get off the teat and get to work. It's, hey, join the rest of humanity that's like vibrantly engaged in participating in the market and providing value for other people and getting value that we've earned and wanting to engage with each other as equals, as customers, as clients, as partners. Like that's the opportunity that people are missing. So to the person sitting on the couch on welfare who doesn't have to be there, I just want to say, look, the world wants you. We want your participation. Maybe it's not we want to pull the rug out from underneath you, because I don't want to do that. But if society can support you, if your community can support you, find a way to transition out of that. And I think the way that we do that is through this process of localization. So again, to your question, right away, we don't want to challenge people's concept of government as much as their geographic scope of thinking of government, right? You get government from federal down to states. Everything that the government does for welfare is going to be more in line with people's needs and communities. And so you're going to be able to get that transition. You get government even more local, and if there is any welfare at all that's necessary in the sort of programmatic government welfare sense that we have now, it'll be done at the community level, and people will have the support to really support themselves when that's possible.
So we are running a little low on time, but I want to ask one thing. We have November 11th coming up, Veterans Day coming up. We're actually going to be downtown in Wichita broadcasting live the Veterans Day parade. So I want to ask, it's something that a lot of people care about because a lot of people join the military. They're maybe not treated so well when they're in the military, and then when they leave, they get the cold shoulder from the government that promised to take care of them. So what do we do for the VA? What do we do for the veterans who have fought the government wars, who now are stuck?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked, because it's an issue that's really near to my heart as a veteran and who's worked with and organized a lot of veterans in my activism. And with 22 veterans committing suicide every day, that's an epidemic, and it's because they push pills at the VA. They are killing veterans on behalf of pharmaceutical companies, and it's pretty obvious to anybody who looks at the problem that this needs to stop. I don't have a problem with the VA existing. I think it's a great institution with a lot of good people working for it that's hindered by the bureaucracy over it. So what I would do with the VA, the platform that I'm putting forth, spins it off as a private institution where it gets an endowment from the liquidating funds of the federal government, and every veteran in America gets one ownership voting share. And when you put those resources in the hands of veterans, I guarantee you're not going to have 22 veteran suicides a day. And in this campaign, we've always had more military members in our ranks as libertarians than the general population, because a lot of people who experience the worst, heaviest hand of government firsthand are propelled away from that, intellectually, ideologically, emotionally, from the reaction to participating in that evil. And so we are already organizing Military for Kokesh, and we have a lot of exciting plans in the works. And I am super, super happy to see that so many veterans are standing up to militarism, as we are doing fundamentally with this campaign. So if I may, for those of you watching on Facebook out there tonight, if you're watching this live, we're going to be at Headshots Bar and Grill at 7 o'clock. And the main event for this Wichita stop on the Taxationist Theft Tour is tomorrow, Friday, November 10th at 6 p.m. at 4714 East Douglas Avenue. That's 4714 East Douglas Avenue. And of course, my book, Freedom, is available there for free, because so many people have donated to make it possible to travel the country and give these books out for free, who want other people to get the message. And I'll just wrap it up. TheFreedomLine.com, you can find the book for free in every digital format there, TheFreedomLine.com, and you can find all the information about the presidential campaign and all my other social media presences there. So thank you again for this opportunity. It's been really awesome. I appreciate it again.
Well, and thank you for coming in, and thank you for treating Wichita to a radical free market voluntarist perspective. So I appreciate it, and I think our viewers do too. So we'll be right back with more of The Honest Media after this break. And again, you can find Adam Kokesh online, and go check him out tonight and go check him out tomorrow night. He's easily located, Headshots, and right in the middle of town, downtown Wichita. Welcome back to The Honest Media. I'm Tom Pappert here with Craig Chrisler. I hope you enjoyed having Adam Kokesh here in studio. He's an interesting character, if nothing else, definitely a free thinker, and someone you're not going to hear on our competitors in the mainstream media, of course. So again, you can find him tonight. We'll be posting information about that on Facebook. You can find it on The Honest Media on Facebook. Now, what I want to talk about for the rest of the show is what's going on across the world. And Craig, President Trump is having some fun in China, isn't he?
I haven't got to see much of what's going on there, but...
Well, it's been interesting. The Chinese have a long-standing tradition of trying to wow world leaders whenever they go to China. But Trump has gotten to do something that's special that has not been covered very fairly. He's gotten to actually dine in China's Forbidden City, which I don't know, it is called the Forbidden City. I don't know when the last time this has happened, but he is for sure the first U.S. president to actually get the honor of doing such a thing. And I find it very interesting. You know, the Chinese never seem to care that much about the apologizer-in-chief, Obama. It never seemed to, you never saw this massive display that you see now. But I mean, it has been an entire day of whining and dining our president.
I saw a little bit last night when he first got there, and everybody was dancing and big parades. So
Right.
Looks like they're happy to have him there.
It's not it's not the ill welcome that a lot of people said he would get, and especially considering Trump has been so harsh against China, something that I think we've got an article about. Yeah, here it is. And he actually, this is done in a very intelligent way because the Chinese are intelligent people. Trump has said this repeatedly. So what he said now, and this is from Gateway Pundit, in Beijing, Trump blasts the previous administrations for the $347 billion trade deficit with China, meaning he is not blaming China.
Yeah, it's not China's fault they got a good deal.
Right. I mean, they're doing what they're doing what they should be doing for their people in a way, which is a very, he could have gone there and he could have done like he did just the day before in South Korea, in which he was very, very harsh against the North. But instead, he's being fairly even-handed and fair because
it's not his fault Obama sold us all down the river.
Well, and I mean,
everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, it started with the Clintons, selling a night in the Lincoln bedroom and our trade secrets for a couple $100,000 to the Clinton Foundation, and all this comes to light. But of course, nothing will ever happen from it. Yeah. But it's a night and day difference in terms of how they greet Trump versus how they've greeted our previous.
And
leaders.
he's not bowing to these people.
He's
either.
not bowing. That was one of the greatest moments of Japan when he didn't bow to the emperor. And then you've got the left saying how wonderful it was that Obama did, and Trump just doesn't understand. And then I actually saw a Japanese, I don't know who it was, but I know it was a check mark on their Twitter account. So they're Twitter verified. And they said that they find, the bowing is stupid and that they liked the handshake.
Yeah, I saw that too. And then he threw all the food into the koi pond.
Right. Which actually, the Japanese guy, Abe, did it first. He did it first. So that was some quality fake news.
Yeah.
Trump commits genocide against koi fish. But it's been very interesting in Asia, and especially with North Korea. He actually did something that was kind of impressive. He opened the door to negotiating with the North Koreans. Now, the North Koreans may have thrown that door shut. They did something like called Trump insane, which is like the pot calling the kettle black. But they may have thrown that door shut, but he actually said that, he said something along the lines of, we will find a brighter path. We will do that with you. If I were that crazy little dictator, I don't know what on earth he's thinking because he's got the perfect out. He's not even going to die, it sounds like. That is like really, we just had the libertarian here.
Well, the guy's crazy, so.
That's true.
Yeah.
And probably there's definitely some weird selective breeding going on there.
Yeah.
But it's like we just had.
It's all for the haircut.
It's all for the haircut. It's all the haircut sucks the brain cells out of his brain.
Apparently.
It dines on gray matter. But this is actually, and this is something that's interesting. Is the world needs more China experts because China, nothing they do is just on accident. They do everything intentionally.
Oh yes.
And the Chinese communist state-run media has been incredibly kind to our president, which that's strange. I don't, they're obviously playing something here.
Oh, yeah.
I'll just read a little bit of from Breitbart. They had an article where they got a couple of quotes from the official Chinese communist newspaper, the state-sponsored Global Times. They described Trump's lack of interest in conflict as a good tendency, in addition to Trump's particular focus on the importance of reviving the U.S. economy. They said that the Chinese visit was Trump's most important part of the tour. They said that they were happy to greet him with enthusiasm, and they just kind of go on and on. And I do wonder if some of this is not just organic, and they're not just happy about President Trump not being another warmongering globalist who thinks that China should be nothing but a colony of the United States empire. So we've got to take a moment off, but I want to get your thoughts, Craig, as we continue to discuss China. We're also going to talk about Donna Brazile coming up next. She called the Clinton campaign a cult, among other things. Then we'll talk about the culture war and what's going on in the rest of the country. You're watching The Honest Media. We'll be right back. mass media, so I wanted to go ahead and get to Donna Brazile, who, of course, wrote a new book called Hacked, which is, of course, a lie, because Trump did not win by being hacked. Hillary did not lose by being hacked. Hillary lost because of what was actually in Donna Brazile's book. See, I feel like Donna Brazile, you know, she's undoubtedly an intelligent woman.
Oh, yes.
And I feel like what she did with the name of her book is she set it up so liberals might buy it. Because otherwise, this is strictly a conservative book.
It's a good marketing strategy.
Yeah, it really is, because it makes you think from the cover that it's going to be a story about how Russia won the election. Then you start reading it.
Which was proven that they did nothing with the hacking. Yeah.
Some Facebook ads. But then, I mean, this book is like, it is a treasure trove. I don't think it's been very reported in the mainstream media. If you've been watching InfoWars here on channel 26.10, if you've been watching Newsmax TV, you've gotten a little more fair coverage of it. But this book is a stunning indictment on Clinton, on the Clinton campaign, on the Democratic National Committee. These are a couple excerpts that come to us through Breitbart of Brazile's interview on, and try not to gag, Craig, Morning Joe. Brzezinski. But this is a little bit of what Brazile had to say. It, meaning the Hillary Clinton campaign, it was a cult. I felt like it was a cult. You could not penetrate them. I mean, look, I'm a grassroots organizer. I know street politics better than I know sweet politics. I know how to touch people where they live, work, pray, and play. But I cannot help a candidate, Joe, if I don't have the resources. If I cannot spend the resources that the party is raising because there's a blind agreement between the campaign and then, of course, being the terrible hosts they are, Mika and Joe start interrupting Brazile. But it seemed like a cult. The way that nobody can question whether or not Hillary is going to win. We are now at the 1-year anniversary, and Hillary did not win. She lost so bad. We're at the anniversary of the salt mining right now. We're the day after the election, November 9th. And, I mean, but do you remember? I mean, we felt like we were insane. We were the only ones in the media in Wichita saying Trump was going to win this thing.
Yeah. Well, we took time to look at their fake polls, so
right.
Yeah.
Look at the crooked polls.
Yeah. Well, the Clintons had the Clinton cult crime family goes back a long time now, so
well, that's true.
Calling them a cult that's a nice name for them.
Well, one thing that's interesting is Donna Brazile actually referenced Seth Rich. She dedicated her book.
Called it her son or something.
Well, she dedicated the book to Seth Rich. She said that he was a true American patriot. At one point, she talks about how she asked for a desk, an office where her desk was looking out a window, and she had this beautiful window, and she said she thought to herself, maybe she shouldn't be in that office anymore because of the window. I mean, this is a woman who, she is destroying the Democratic Party and the Democratic National Committee.
I was watching her last night on Tucker Carlson, and she's trying to put the spin on that now, saying that she was afraid of Republicans maybe coming after her.
See, you got to wonder with this woman what game she's playing here. I've actually got an article about exactly that.
She probably got a suicide note.
Yeah,
from the Clintons.
She got the 2 bullets to the back of the head note, the Vince Foster treatment.
Yes.
But I've got an excerpt from that interview right here that comes to us from InfoWars. During her interview with Tucker Carlson last night, former DNC chair Donna Brazile suggested that the media were panicked over questions about Hillary Clinton's health during the election, despite publicly dismissing the issue as a conspiracy theory, which I think really tells us something. I mean, you look at that woman, what was it most recently? She broke her toe and rolled her ankle, and then she writes on Twitter, I will persist. Like, she talks like somebody who was just diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah, she was just drunk and rolled her ankle probably.
Stumbling around, you know. Well, and you know, we've talked about that before. The trucker pills, the fact that she's taking Valium, the fact that she, you know, in the airplane after the debate, she won't take any questions because she wants to get drinks.
Yeah.
Her words, direct quote, totally insane.
Just a party animal.
There you go. And, you know, you got to slow down when you're in your 70s. Most people learn this. She powers through.
That's
like
right.
Like it's 70 degrees
She's persisting.
outside. She's persisting. coughing. That's right. But to go a little bit further into the article, throughout the campaign, the mainstream media dismissed questions about Hillary's coughing fits, stumbles, and collapses as baseless conspiracy theories, a narrative that intensified after InfoWars released a video on the subject that went viral, receiving millions of views in a period of a couple weeks. But during her Fox News appearance, Brazile suggested that behind the scenes, journalists were desperately scrambling to find out what was actually happening. And so the interview goes on, and then basically Brazile admits that the media was just towing the line, but really even they were horribly concerned because Hillary's health was absolutely something that is on the board. Everybody should have been concerned with it. She could have been president of the United States. Yet again, we in the alternative media are vindicated an entire year later. That's how pathetic this is. We've got to take another moment off. You're watching The Honest Media. We will be back to wind down the show next break. Welcome back to The Honest Media. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope you enjoyed Adam a little earlier in the show. And I hope you go out to see him and show that Wichita has a lot of liberty-loving individuals, even if we may not all call ourselves libertarian. So I want to get back to this Donna Brazile talking about Hillary Clinton's health when she was on Tucker Carlson last night, because as Craig said, she kind of waffled on some of what she said in her book, but she also completely vindicated a lot of people regarding Clinton's health and a couple other topics. And if you remember watching this show, I mean, we talked about Hillary's trucker pills. I mean, it was Valium. She was taking Valium, which is
a guy following her around with an injectable...
With the diazepam pen.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a whole thing. We spent a long time talking about her health, only to be called conspiracy theorists.
Even though the whole thing was on camera. And
right, she fainted. The woman fainted on camera. But this is all...
Spaz attacks when...
Right.
Ask
have the chai latte, you know. I mean, it's like, what on earth is going on with this lady? Yeah, we are sexists, we're bigots, we're terrible people if we question it. So this is what Donna Brazile had to say about that on TV. This is recent. This is last night. I had a lot of reporters that were calling my office, calling my home, texting me, sending me emails. In fact, there was a reporter that I mentioned that broke the story to me that she had fainted. And I immediately called up to Brooklyn and I tried to reach people on the road with her to find out if this was a rumor, as you well know, with the Russian meddling in our campaign. And yes, it happened. There were so many rumors that you had to debunk. And so by the time I saw the video, when the video went viral, you can imagine what was happening within the Democratic Party, what was happening inside of the inner circles. And then elsewhere in the interview, she mentioned that she was getting death threats after the publication of her book, which again has been very critical of Hillary Clinton and the campaign. So at least if she's gonna lie in her book or lie when she's talking to the camera, if she's gonna give us the fact that yes, the Clinton health crisis was real, I'll take that.
Yeah.
I mean, that was ridiculous.
Which we all knew.
Everybody knew it, but the gaslighting that happened in 2016 was unreal. No, Trump doesn't have any supporters. Well, why did I go to a rally last night where there were 30,000 of them?
Yeah, every single night.
Yeah, every night of the week. You watch it on YouTube, 30,000 people. Doesn't matter if he's in Wichita, Kansas, or New York City.
Yeah.
He'd have thousands of people lining up at the door, can't even get in, trying to go to his dang rally. No, they tell us that he doesn't have any support.
It still happens every time.
Still happens.
Yeah.
That's right, still happens. Trump's support is melting away as we still have these events, sometimes where Trump isn't even at the dang thing, and you get 10,000 people showing up. So it's great to know that even a year down, we are still learning exactly how right we were. So we've been talking about the culture war. I wanted to get to this article because who knew? I mean, you and I, we don't follow football. Let's get that out there.
I try not to.
Let's be honest. But it's nice to see that, because it's a red-blooded American sport, and the Cowboys are possibly one of the most American teams. Good old Texas, right? Well, the Cowboys owner threatens to sue the NFL if Goodell does not take action against the anthem kneelers. Dallas Cowboy owner Jerry Jones is threatening to sue the NFL again if Goodell does not take action. This comes to us through the Gateway Pundit. And what they've got is a report through ESPN. A team owner and a team executive told Outside the Lines that Jones has hired David Boies, the famed New York lawyer who represented Al Gore in the deadlocked 2000 presidential election. That's how serious this is.
Yeah.
And basically they are going to go after them, and if they don't do something to punish these players, they're going to do something. And it is a
Sounds good to me.
It's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. I mean, Papa John's, who's now been attacked by the left, but the owner came out and said, well, look, you want to know why we're making money? We buy all this Super Bowl advertising and or all this football advertising. Nobody's watching football this year because of the kneelers. Mm-hmm. And they all act like this is like some revelation.
Yeah.
Like, you mean people aren't watching an entertainment program that has been politicized? Who could have seen that coming?
Yeah.
The people they have to be the stupidest out there.
Yeah. The NFL just as an organization has gotten worse and worse and worse every year.
Well, and
banning gun ads, everything they can.
They kicked Hank Williams Jr. out there because he said something vaguely offensive to an audience once.
Yeah.
I mean, and now he gets to come back.
Like halftime shows, they got like people like Beyonce and stuff. That should tell you everything you need to know about the NFL.
Right. I definitely think the average football fan really cares about Beyonce. I mean, it's like, who do they think their audience is? In our little...
Well, now mostly I think it's women.
Yeah,
actually.
I think you might be onto something. 'Cause, it's like here in Wichita, we go through a process and we say, okay, our typical viewer is John Everyman, and John Everyman works this kind of job and does this on the weekend. We know what our target viewer is. Apparently, ESPN doesn't know about this practice. They just think,
they just don't care.
They just don't care. Well, and something, as we conclude the show, because we've got to wrap up, we did have some more news, but we did pretty good this time. But as we wrap up, I just want to say that it's been very interesting this past year to see exactly how sane Trump supporters are and how insane the mainstream media
and how insane the anti-Trump people
and
are.
how insane
hollering at the moon last night.
They like werewolves, except that we're past the full moon. I mean, the Trump supporters, who the media will say that we are knuckle-dragging lunatics who just rape and are violent, and we hate everybody who doesn't look like us. Yeah, we are the ones who have been incredibly civil. We are the ones who have been kind, who have been tolerant, who have been taking all of the abuse that we get from the mainstream media. And I just would like to say thank you to our viewers for hanging in there the past couple years that we've been withering through this, because as you can see, we are winning. It's been a year since the election. The triggering still hasn't stopped. They're still wailing in the streets, and they will be for the foreseeable future. And all we got to do is just enjoy it now. So at least we've got that.
Yes.
Well, Craig, I appreciate you coming in and talking to Adam with me, I should say. And as always, you can find us again, same time, same place, next week, right here at The Honest Media. We'll see you next time.